Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else.
Good morning and welcome back to Suffolk Matters. I'm Tom Moran, the Executive Vice President, Suffolk AME, filling in for Dan Leveler today. My guest today is Steve Floudern, Suffolk County Legislator for the 11th District, covering South Shore communities in the town of Islip, parts of Fire Island, and a section of the town of Babylon. As Deputy Presiding Officer, thank you for joining us today, Steve.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Before we dive into our discussions today, we're going to discuss some of your journey to becoming the Deputy Presiding Officer of Suffolk County, your experiences in insurance as a civic leader in the town of Islip, and all of that must have been instrumental in you coming into office.
Yeah, well, a little about my background. I grew up in Lynbrook, and after college, I got into the insurance business. I was insurance and also stockbroker. And when I moved to Brightwaters over 30 years ago, which is Bayshore area, I got civically involved right away because parts of Bayshore was having its problems in its downtown and stuff. And after getting civically involved, how you get civically involved, you go to a meeting, you ask a question. Next thing you know, you're chairing a committee. And I was 37 years old, and I didn't even know anything about committees or anything like that. But from those experiences and a lot of successes with multiple people in the communities, you've probably seen how Bayshore has changed over the last 20 years. Because I first moved there was more than 50% of the stores on Main Street were boarded up, and there was a lot of nefarious activities happening on Main Street. And now, when I first moved there was only one restaurant, Tina's 2. Now there's 31 restaurants and 6 coffee houses, so it's been a lot of big changes. But anyway, I got civically involved, and slowly after being civically involved for 10 years, I got asked to run in 2005, and I was on the Islip Town Board for 12 years. And after the Islip Town Board, now I'm in the county. I'm in my 6th year now. I actually started my 7th year. And, loving every step of it. So it was a change of career over the last 20 years doing this.
So, like you said, as you're starting this, your 7th year, you're beginning your 2nd term as Deputy Presiding Officer. What does that role encapsulate for the people that are not really familiar with what your job is?
Yeah, well, basically how government works is, this is a county executive, and we're like the checks and balances, just like you have, in New York State, you have a governor and you have assembly and a Senate. Well, here we have the legislature that does, the checks and balances on the county exec. And as a role, as there's 18 legislators, as you said at the very beginning about the areas I represent, such as West Islip, Bayshore, parts of Fire Island, and North and West Babylon, is out of the 18 of us, our legislator is a presiding officer and the deputy. And the presiding officer is Kevin McCaffrey, and his responsibility is to really help lead the review of all the things the county is working on, and his deputy, which is really just like the vice president or anything else. It's, if he's not able to perform his duties, I'm there. I'm there to help and assist, help try to corral all the personalities together, and when there's questions, I try to have them answered so things don't get clogged, just like a lot of things in a lot of the departments you work with. We don't get them approved, or we get lost in minutia of bickering on some topics. The people's business becomes stagnant, and it becomes a problem. So,
listen, out of the 18 legislators, you're one of the few that some of your constituents have to take a ferry to come talk to you about their issues, right? And you the same, to go see some of the voters when you're campaigning and stuff. You got to go across over to Fire Island and speak to these people.
But it's a great honor because besides anything else, it's one of the most beautiful places in this country. So it's an honor to represent there, and thank God I'm a little bit of a boater also. So I don't mind getting out there. I love getting out there.
But again, that is an area now that they have special needs that doesn't happen anywhere else in the county.
Oh yeah, especially during the storm seasons. And right now, actually, I was leading for last couple of years, and the report should be coming out soon. Is one of the big problems in Fire Island is very high water table. So their cesspools are almost touching the water table. You go to Fire Island, you dig down 6 inches. What do you find? You find water when you make your sandcastle. Well, that's where the cesspools are. And I was working with CTUC and Citizens Campaign for the Environment, and we brought all the different community groups together, such as to try to solve the problem. Because I'm no longer going to go on tangents here, but there was a whole study on Long Island about our sewer. How should we treat our wastewater in the future in Suffolk County? But they did not have in the study anything really about Fire Island, which is its own unique geological area. So I was leading with Citizen Campaign for the Environment and with CTALK for a couple of years, bringing all the community groups together to come up with a plan. And the problem was in the past, like, how do you move forward when there's so many different personalities? There's 2 towns, there's 2 villages, there's there's a state and the federal government with fins. So you had to bring all these different jurisdictions into one room to come up with all the questions. Because if you don't bring them all in one room, you start to move one direction, then somebody else raises a hand like, oh, why aren't you going this direction? And you never get anything done, which has happened for years. So we came up with a report of the questions we wanted to come up for the study for how to treat wastewater on Fire Island. From that, I got county money through the 0.25% sales tax to do a study of Fire Island about how do we solve the wastewater management there in the future. Because right now, you always hear how our wastewater, the nitrogen's getting into the bay, and a lot of times within 30 years, and Ronkonkoma will get in the bay. But on Fire Island, sometimes it's 30 days, and we need to solve that problem, which is polluting the bay. And we should be having a report out soon on that. So some of the unique problems there, because how does a homeowner reinvest its home if they can't get the health department to do its approval because they can't handle the waste byproduct? The same thing with the restaurants or other businesses there. So it's stagnating the economy over there. So that's one of the big things we've been working on, and hopefully we'll have a report of the master plan to solve the wastewater management on that island.
And we could circle back, and like you said, when you got involved and you moved into the area where you live, there wasn't that many businesses. Now, the downtown Bayshore area and stuff, those businesses are booming now. Same thing happens on Fire Island. And a January crowd as compared to a July crowd over there. You have a lot more people there, a lot more people on the island using the services. I know my background is coming from fire rescue as a dispatcher. There's an emergency over there. You can't send an ambulance there. We have to fly everybody like out of Ocean Beach and stuff, or out of other parts of the island. They have their own police department. We have the Suffolk County Police Department with the Marine Bureau. There's a lot of moving pieces there. But something in January is not as hard to do, let's say, in June, July, August, when it's more populated on Fire Island.
Well, it's part of why I think it's important a lot of times, and I find that it's part of my job, is how do you bridge the different fractions and the different sides? And a lot of times when we talk about wastewater and not just wastewater, just our water quality, people stereotype it as just a green tree hugger thing or something. Well, I also like to focus on the green of the economics. If we have a polluted bay, how is that going to affect tourism? How does that affect our tax base? Suffolk County survives on sales tax. So if we don't have a clean bay and we don't have the tourists, everything sort of collapses. So it's bringing those different fractions from, the ones who care about the environment to the economics. They do work together, and a lot of times they always separate it, pit them against each other. But I think it's so important, and I think that's how we were able to move forward on coming up with a study for Fire Island, because it was bringing the business owner and the economics to the people that care about the environment together.
And that's something that people have to think about. They hear the initiatives that are being made for clean water. And they're thinking about when they turn on their faucet, they're not really understanding the process that goes through it. That involves so many of our members, wastewater and everything to that effect. It's a really big problem. The now county executive has said over and over again, we stand on our drinking water, which is true, that we are an island. And these are things that we have waited, it's gone far too long where we've started to think about that, hey, we need to do something. And, to our elected officials like yourself, we're moving on it to move this forward so that we can have clean water, but it's also our drinking water, that it's filtered water, that, our sewage has to go somewhere. These are things that have bypassed, but now I think we're moving in the right direction, we could say, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So you're the chair also of the Budget and Finance and Public Safety Committees, in addition to the other work that you do as a legislator. Shape us some of the responsibilities that you have in those fields.
Well, one of the things I was focused on first, say in the Budget and Finance Committee, which you hear a lot of times people think, oh, it's a boring topic or something. But my background in insurance and investment and financial planning, it's focusing on the whole economics, how everything works. That's why I even just tied it before with wastewater management. If you don't have clean bays, you don't get sales tax. How do you sell these $1 million homes on the bay if you have this looking at a cesspool in a sense? So the values are dropped, the assessed values of the homes, and going a little deep on that is I was worried about our bond rating, and a lot of people, some people maybe glaze over when I say that. Is Suffolk County out of 62 counties in the state of New York was ranked in the worst financial shape out of all 62 counties, and we're one of the richest counties in the country economically as a machine. How are we the lowest bond rating, which is just total mismanagement? We were spending about $150 million more a year than we were bringing in for a while. A lot of that has changed. One is many things. The economy has changed. It was pandemic money we got from the federal government bailed us out of some things, and I think some of our with my colleagues, some of our more conservative thinking about making sure we have balanced budgets where we were writing budgets before which weren't balanced. Example, you would put sometimes in for police like $20 million of overtime, and every year we were spending 30. How do you put $20 million in if you're really spending 30? That's a lied budget. They call that in private practice Enron. People go to jail for making fraudulent budgets, then floating bonds with those numbers. And understanding that, I try to bring that out all the time and try to get corrective measures like do an honest budget. Either make cuts or you have to make changes. And so we solely have a balanced budget. Why it's so important when I brought that boring term, it sounds like bond rating, is just like as a homeowner, if you have a bad bond rating means like credit score. If you have a bad credit score, it's going to cost you twice as much to buy a mortgage or refinance your home. While the county borrows money to pave streets and do other projects, we're going to pay twice as much. That means your taxes have to go up to cover that. And that's why it's so important about bond rating. It's probably one of the most important things we have to do is keep our bond rating higher and raising our bond rating. When there was 8 bond downgrades the county had over the last decade. So we are working towards raising that, building the reserves up, which will save taxpayers money in the long run.
And speaking of the budget is, there was times where you're being taxed on positions that are in the budget that aren't filled, right? We know that there's roughly 2,280 positions that are empty right now that need to be filled across the county. Our positions, police department, all across that. But a lot of talk was about how those positions were in the budget but not filled, but you're taxing the taxpayer for it.
And what was the mismanagement was, at a lot of time, I'll use an example. In some communities, I'm talking about some in my own neighborhood, where at 3:00, 8 police officers were pulled out of their sector to cross children as crossing guards because we have a shortage of crossing guards. And because a lot of people say, well, you fill more positions, you're going to have to raise taxes. Not fully. It's sometimes looking at the business numbers. When you have a crossing guard using rough numbers, a round number, say if they make $20 an hour. When you have a police officer that has to now do overtime, who's making $100 an hour, is now getting $150 an hour to cross kids for an hour, plus there's no policing going on or anything else. That's bad management, and that's what was happening. In one school district alone, in the after school, there's over 8 sector cars were pulled to cross the kids because there wasn't enough to fill in the positions. And that is signing, as you sometimes use the terminology, is the skins off, or if there's a shortage of finding certain employees, is working hard on recruitment. Like I was working with our Department of Labor, like if this is a problem, why don't we work with the local Chamber of Commerce and do job fairs and make sure the county is represented at the job fair besides the local banks and pizzerias and everything else. Let's have our every position from park rangers to police officers. Let's do our own recruiting with them to solve this problem. But in the long run, that is part of the mismanagement. We could hire sometimes a lot more people and not spend, instead of $30 million on overtime. As I pointed out earlier, we could be hiring people to fill the positions. It's just some of the employees are also just getting so overworked, and plus it's wasteful how we're managing this.
Public safety is paramount. How are you working to ensure Suffolk County remains a safe place to live and work, especially in terms of resources for law enforcement and our emergency services?
On many things, but it's like I think it's going to be a little easier now. As I had before, a little problem. Sometimes happens in, I guess, politics of government when the two different branches. Legislature was majority Republican, which that's why I'm a deputy, and the county executive was Democrat Party. Is that sometimes the communications was not that good, and I was finding, for example, the police department we put in a budget for amount of officers, and I think in the budget he originally wrote 160, but I almost had like trying to get the answer why are they only putting another 160 people in to recruit for 2024, and because they were already planning 140 retirements at the beginning of the year they knew about. And finding out from the department, but I wasn't finding out directly. I had to almost find out indirectly. They needed a lot more than that. Amending the budget so there's enough recruits in to replace all the people that are leaving. And we changed it. I think we went from 160 to like 225 that we put in the budget this year. And the long run is like some people, again, would look quickly, would that be more expensive? Like, no, not really, because the new recruits they're lower paid. The seasoned employees are the pay is 5 times higher a lot of times, especially with all the overtime. That we'd be able to get a lot more bodies in, but we needed to get enough bodies to replace, and those questions weren't being asked. There's such a shortage from detectives to everything else that it's getting hard, and we're spending so much in overtime and not in filling the skins we have. Two things like we just said before about from crossing guards to 911 dispatchers. I know myself, I had to use it recently, and to get through and being on hold for a minute or two, it's life and death situations. We need to be filling these skins, and if there's something that needs to be negotiated with the unions and everything else, sit down and do that. And I know the county exec Romaine is fully aware of that. And he is looking and working with trying to adjust where we need to help recruitment. If we're underpaid to other municipalities, it costs us a lot of money trying to recruit people, and sometimes they leave a week later because they could get another couple of thousand more to another municipality if it's a town, a village, or another county, and that's happening a little too much, and that's sometimes penny wise and dollar foolish.
So when you talk about public safety, obviously it's something close to my heart, because being a 911 operator for 30 years, coming from fire rescue, our people, our members that work in fire rescue, that work in the communications section for the police department, like you said, these jobs are not, you can't come off the street and start doing these jobs. There is 6 months of training before they're even able to help and work tours. There's a huge turnover because a lot of people, once they start doing that job, it's not the job for them. They're constantly hearing people's worst times of their days every single day over and over again. So the recruitment needs to be there. The pay has to be there. We're the largest employer in the county, and we should take care of our members that way with their benefits, with their pay. They shouldn't be forced to work countless hours of overtime for quote unquote blood money. Those are the things that have to be addressed, that I know that you're working on. I know you're chairing a committee. It's not always the easiest committee to chair there because of these unique problems. But I think we know that is the problem, and I've definitely seen the work that you're putting into helping us to get those goals accomplished.
Thank you. And you got to see from me being on the committee for years where legitimately I was trying to get those resolved, just like yourself, and they haven't been. And that's going to be a change now, I believe, and it seems like it's already indication. It's really from the county exec that has to sit down to do all that different negotiations, to make those changes. That's where the control was, which as a legislator, my only opportunity is to approve what he ends up putting forward. I cannot do that myself. So again, actually, I'm right now. I put a call in yesterday. I am sitting down with the county exec within the next week on hitting on these topics of solving these problems.
So recently, a joint press conference was held about the Water Quality Restoration Act. Can you discuss its current status and the steps needed to ensure its passages
Yeah.
in 2024?
It also give you a tiny history. Right now, we already are paying like 0.25% sales tax, and it was up for renewal. And on top of that, they're adding 1/8% to explain that to the people that don't want any type of tax increase as anyone does. But all this will mean is if you spend $100, it'll be 12 cents. That's all it equals to be. And that 12 cents is going to go straight to dedicated fund for sewering or IA system, which are the hybrid of, say, the modern day cesspools, I would say, which removes more nitrogen and everything else. And there's been a master plan they've been working on for like 50 years about cleaning, getting more areas sewered because it's so important because the higher amount of nitrogen and other pathogens that are being dumped into our bays and streams. But about a year ago, you might have saw in the press how some of us blocked the last one. The problem was the one that was written seemed like it was right before my election where I was getting attacked on that all of a sudden I don't care about water. And stepping back, as I said 10 minutes ago when we were discussing, I've been working the last 2 years and coming up with a master plan how to solve Fire Island. The problem was with the bill that was given to us originally, guaranteed 75% of the new money going towards 75% minimum of the new money would go to only IAs, which are these hybrid cesspools, the areas only that need cesspool, which are more areas with a lot more property. But they cost a fifth of the cost of sewers. So the point is we need a lot more money towards sewers, and they were giving 75% to up to 100% only going to IAs, which was 25% or nothing would go to sewers, and that is what costs more money. And also more populated areas or more needs, such as where I am in Western Suffolk or in the South Shore. That's where we need the sewers, and there was no money almost going towards it. Why it's important to have this eighth of percent sales tax, it tells the state and federal government that we are dedicated to expanding our sewer system and managing our septic. And once we have that pipeline that we have dedicated, it guarantees us to be able to be ready for the state and federal grants we can get, which really is like 90% of the money to the sewers. Example, just to hook up our average home, like we're looking to do some areas near me in North Babylon and West Islip, it costs $100,000 a home to connect the home. So we need this federal money to get anything done. So it is very important. This is something that was started back in the 70s on Long Island, but it seemed like it almost stopped in the 80s. We haven't done anything in 50 years, and we have to resolve this for any continued growth. I'll use some examples. I know when I was in town board in Islip, I represented the whole town, and like in Sayville, there's one restaurant in downtown that got approved a couple of years ago, and they aren't allowed to use silverware or plates. They have to use paper plates and plastic forks because they can't get the wastewater approval for the septic to have dishes. And it's like, so and there's some buildings there, if the restaurant opens, the second floor where the apartment is, they have to mothball it, they have to close it because they need that water capacity from the second floor to cover for the dishwasher. And that's why, like, there's no, say, reinvestments in sometimes properties, or sometimes properties just aren't rented because they can't get approved for water quality. Wastewater. I also know in some areas we are very successful, for example, manufacturing in Long Island pharmaceuticals. Well, they're being built these warehouses and everything else. I know in the town of Islip when they were being built, we're only in areas that are connected to the Southwest sewer system because they need a lot of water to run their business. If you don't have proper wastewater management in the area, they can't build. They'll go to another state.
I think the biggest part is what you laid out there. It's very easy for people to, they get the cliff notes of the press conference, or they kind of just skim through it, and all they hear is their taxes are being raised. And, people really need to understand that you can't put an investment on this island. This is something that needs to be done, that is far way overdue, and you're talking about, 12 cents on $100. It's really... it's something that's just, we need to continue to get out there to say how good this is for the island and move forward with it, quite frankly.
That 12 cents ends up equaling like $50-something million a year to the county, which will get us the matching. And sometimes the matching is like 90%. So that $50 million might end up equaling like $400 million or something per year. So, and again, that sounds like a lot of money, but you start adding them when it costs $100,000 a home to connect, to do one little neighborhood. It could be $100 million project.
And you're doing it the right way now. If it's $400 million, $200 million is going in that direction, instead of the way that it was first written, that it was going to be a much smaller number. What other initiatives or bills are you particularly excited about that are coming up in this session?
It's not any. It's many different topics. One is actually one problem on Long Island going into policing and everything else is we're looking in, and I'm having a meeting with the district attorney and also with the police chief and commissioner. There's a lot of road racing problems happening on Long Island where there is drag racing and everything else. And the thing is, they get besides them being illegal, they're getting out of control and dangerous. The other one is also these house parties. Sometimes there's things on the internet where they're having these parties, which all of a sudden like 1,000 people show up in someone's backyard, and sometimes they're charging as much as $1,000 to come into this party, and they have these vehicles with these speakers that could shake your whole street, and it gets to there's some little holes in the law, and sometimes shutting them down, or sometimes when they go to court, they get a little $500 fine, but they made $30,000 on the party, so it's a slap in the wrist, and we have to look at other ways to how do we stop these, and because it's really affecting the quality of life in many different neighborhoods.
Steve, thanks for sharing your insights today. But before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add? Any community events or want to highlight for us?
One, I'm looking forward to this 2024, and again with a new county exec, because there's a lot of things I felt the last couple of years were sitting in the back shelf we'll be able to solve, and I know from your viewpoint you would love to hear, let's solve some things with 911 operators and crossing guards and a bunch of other positions. And another little thing is, to get the word out, I'm honored for my job of going to so many different things at Eagle Scouts. I'm on the regional board of the Saginaw District, and they have a fundraiser they're doing this year, Heart of the Community, and I'm the honoree. But it's not about me. My job is to make sure they get the donations. So looking for anything for the Heart of the Community for the Saginaw District of Suffolk County Boy Scouts. And this money is to go to help all the scouting on Suffolk County and to do outreach in the areas where they need more needs help in scouting, say the more at need communities.
And if anybody wanted to help with that cause, what would be the best way for them to get that to you?
One is Suffolk County Scouts, or reach out to my office and we connect them right to the proper email and everything for that.
As always, it was good having you. My guest again, Steve Flotteren, legislator in the 11th District and the Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you.